Good evening everyone and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update for the Australian region tonight, the 9th of March 2014. My name's Chris Nitzo, and tonight I was hoping to be bringing you this update from the road while we were chasing a Category 1 or 2 tropical cyclone onto the Bowen coastline, but it's not happening that way. And unfortunately, as these things go, sometimes they do what you expect and sometimes they don't. And while we were sort of going at a 50-50 probability of it hitting the coastline, we were hopeful that if it did stall, it was going to stall a lot closer, and therefore even if we didn't get the center of the system, we would have got something to record. But never mind. Let's have a look up here. This is the Tropical Cyclone Gillian out here. You can see that Tropical Cyclone Gillian is being sheared away as well, just like the tropical low out here in the Coral Sea, whose low-level circulation center is well to the north-northwest of all this cloud and rain that you're seeing here. This cloud and rain is being sheared off the system due to some strong vertical wind shear. The system is pushing in a south-southeast direction at this point in time. It's not expected to make landfall. And this system here is much more interesting, though, in the longer term. This system in the Coral Sea is producing some rainfall. You can see here some of the totals now getting up there in the Airlie Beach region and the Mackay region. Even heading further south towards Rocky, we're seeing some rainfall, although not very strong. But we are seeing a little bit of a fresh onshore stream and an increase in rain and cloudy conditions all across central Queensland, which is fantastic. Let's hope they get a little bit of rain from the system before it starts drifting northeastwards over the next 24 to 48 hours. Alright, over the Gulf, this system is likely to push in a southerly and then southwesterly direction. Now, there's still a fairly high variability in terms of its movement as to how far west and how far south, and anywhere along the West Peninsula coastline and the southern Gulf of Carpentaria, and even in the longer term, the western Gulf of Carpentaria could be in with a chance at getting this system. So, overall, the Bureau of Meteorology expects the system to drift in a south to southeast direction over the next day or so, and then after that it should shift in a more southwest or even west-southwest direction as an upper level ridge or mid-level ridge builds over southern Australia and central Australia, or even there's a hint there on the Tropical Cyclone Technical Bulletin that a ridge could build a little earlier over North Queensland, and if that happens, the system is likely to push a little bit further to the north of this error margin. If the ridge isn't as strong over central Australia, it is likely to push in a more southerly direction, and therefore Mornington Island could be in the direct firing line, as could some of these places in the southeast Gulf outside of the error margin, should the ridge not be as strong as predicted. Now, there is still the possibility that it might make a Western Peninsula landfall, and some of the model guidance today is showing that it could make a landfall here between Arakoon and Gilbert River mouth. The other thing to note is that the Bureau of Meteorology is expecting the system to become a severe tropical cyclone, despite most of the model guidance which suggests otherwise. So once again, the Bureau deciding that this is probably a small enough system to react quickly to a more favourable area for development, or a more favourable atmosphere for development, and so therefore the system intensifies pretty rapidly into a Category 3 and even a high-end Category 3 in the technical bulletin as the system tracks and makes landfall eventually in the Northern Territory. But once again, there is a lot of error in that guidance, and so you're looking at here, that's a 400 kilometre scale there, so you're looking at about 600 kilometres worth of error margin out to day 3. So it's a significant error margin, folks. As for this one, well, it's pushing in a south-southeast direction very, very slowly. It's expected to pretty well stall now in the next 6 to 12 hours. It may form into a tropical cyclone tomorrow as wind shear starts to decrease over the system. That will only be for a short period, though. Wind shear will re-increase as the system tracks in a northeast direction. Look, the error margin is starting to narrow now. We're starting to look at, that's a 400 kilometre scale again. You're starting to look at about 600 kilometres worth of error. There is still the possibility, and it is only a remote possibility, but there is still the possibility that the system may be steered by something not expected, like the subtropical ridge over southeastern Queensland, southeastern Australia, and because of that, it may drift further to the west and get closer to the coast. There is that outside possibility, but right now it is an outside possibility. I guess the warning area is there because if the system does tighten up over the next 24 hours and it gets just that little bit closer to the coast, we will see gales in the Townsville to, particularly the Townsville to Mackay area. So the possibility is there that you may experience gales from the system, but in terms of actual crossing of the system, that remains a fairly remote possibility, and on model guidance is really not a favoured outcome. The good news, I guess, is model guidance is finally, with 12 to 24 hours away from what should have been a landfall, is finally coming to some agreement that there won't be a landfall. So model guidance for this has just been dreadful, and I do mean dreadful. Everything in the Coral Sea this year has been dreadful from the computer models. So thankfully there's finally coming together and suggesting a very similar track now to what is being shown here. So for those people that were hoping for that day off work in this warning area, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. So currently here's what Northern Australian monsoon looks like. We've got monsoon break conditions over the northwest. We have the Gulf of Carpentaria cyclone Gillian as we head eastwards, and then we've also got the tropical low off the North Queensland coastline. As we head further to the east over the Solomons and into Vanuatu particularly, we're starting to see the development on the far east of your screen, or the far right of your screen. You're starting to see the development of a new low pressure system that does have a fairly high potential of becoming a tropical cyclone. Can I state now, and can I state very clearly, that it is not expected to come towards the Queensland coast. This one is not, I repeat, expected to come towards the Queensland coast. So hopefully that will answer the multitude of questions that we're getting about this one training in behind this one, thinking that, you know, that might be some sort of Yassi repeat. It is not going to be. This one is not just really, there is absolutely, I won't say zero chance because there's always that slight chance, but there's a very, very limited probability in the vicinity of 1% that it's going to come towards the Queensland coast. So looking quickly at some of the model guidance here for the two systems, the Gulf of Carpentaria system, according to the GFS model guidance, we expect to push in a south to southeast direction, possibly making landfall here on the West Peninsula, as I mentioned there, as one of the possibilities, and then pushing back to the southwest and then making probably a secondary landfall near the NT to NT Queensland border. Now, in the longer term, this only goes out to 5 days. In the longer term, there is a potential for the system to continue tracking westwards and possibly even re-emerge out off the Kimberley coastline at day 10. Now, over the Queensland Coral Sea system, that Coral Sea system is likely to get a tiny bit closer to the coast, according to the GFS, before stalling tomorrow and then pushing in basically a northeasterly track all the way through to the eastern Coral Sea. Still remaining a fairly weak system as it does that entire track. As you can see here, the new Vanuatu system that we mentioned is not coming towards Queensland. It's coming towards the North Island of New Zealand. It actually may cause New Zealand some pretty big hassles in about a week's time, and there's pretty good guidance there from a lot of different models that are suggesting that the North Island of New Zealand could be in for a bit of a torrid time there in a week. Lo and behold, the only model that got this right for the Coral Sea at least is the UK Met, and the UK Met has been steadfast in telling us this was not going to hit the coast, and it told us that from 10 days ago, that it was not going to hit the coast. And that's what's happened. It's done exactly what the UK Met model has predicted it to do. So let's have a look and place some fairly heavy emphasis on the UK model here. We see that the system tracks just that little bit closer to the coast over the next few hours, then stalls over tomorrow, and then starts to push in a northeasterly direction on Tuesday. Same deal as the GFS pretty much, lying over the Solomon Sea, the Southwest Pacific, very close between Solomon Islands and Fiji. We also see on the 5-day forecast from the UK Met this new Vanuatu low developing into a TC, pushing southeastwards and nearing the North Island of New Zealand on day 5. We also see the track of the Gulf of Carpentaria system, quite a confused track here from the UK Met, where it has it pushing south, then basically has it pushing north. That one seems a little bit out of the ordinary, and so we might not pay attention to that one too much for the time being. But look, we cannot cannot question the UK Met's handle on the Coral Sea cyclone or Coral Sea low. It has just absolutely nailed this 100%. So fantastic work by this computer model. It's been the only global computer model that has had any idea of what's going on. From the world's second most accurate to the world's most inaccurate model, we go to the NavGem or No Gaps model, and we see that the NavGem also pushes the system a little bit further to the south and then basically pushes it directly north and into the far northeastern Coral Sea, redevelops it into a tropical cyclone, or develops it into a tropical cyclone out here in the northeast Coral Sea. Once again, very similar agreement here with the Vanuatu low, so once again, Queenslanders, do not stress, this one's not coming towards you. It's coming to push southeastwards and then southwards towards the North Island of New Zealand. And we also see the Gulf of Carpentaria system basically take a big dive out to the west here and eventually coming very close to the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, and eventually in the longer term of the No Gaps we see it push offshore off the Kimberley coastline, reform into a tropical cyclone. And if we take a quick look at the Bureau of Meteorology's Access Regional Model, thanks to weather zone, we see weather low located at 10 AM this morning, and as we head to 24-hour timestamps, we see that by 10 AM tomorrow morning, the low hasn't pushed too far in any direction, possibly a little bit further to the south, located basically directly off about Ingham. We see most of the rainfall remains well and truly offshore. We do get some moderate falls of rain anywhere from about Ayr southwards to even as far south as the Hervey Bay coast, so there are chances there of 20 plus millimetres in those regions, interspersed with lighter falls of 5 to 10 millimetres along that coastal strip, and also heading as far north as about Townsville there. At 48 hours time, so in 2 days time, we see the system starting to track further out towards the east or east-northeast, and we still see some moderate falls of rain here in some fairly decent onshore flow. So you see the flow here coming in from the east and east-southeast, east and east-northeast, so that convergence is creating some pretty decent rainfall in that area. Once again, nothing overly spectacular, but pretty good soaking rain across the central coast of Queensland. Anywhere sort of anywhere west and north of that though, not going to see too much out of this system at all. Best you can hope for is a bit of cloud and some drizzly stuff. And as in the Gulf of Carpentaria, we see Gillian starting to really intensify on the Access Regional Model, and following pretty well what the Bureau of Meteorology is suggesting there, with a fairly rapid intensification of the system, remaining a fairly small system, and that's why it rapidly intensifies as it pushes to the west. At day 3, we continue to see the Queensland system pushing in an east-northeasterly direction away from the coastline. Most of the rain has now left the onshore regions. Only the exposed coast are getting some isolated showers here. And the Gulf of Carpentaria, Gillian, has now hit the coast, and once again, the big thing to note, when one of these Gulf systems hits the coast, we often see some really heavy rain in this region here, in that northeasterly flow that just comes onshore and just smashes the coast full of rainfall. So you could be seeing some fairly widespread falls of 50 to 100 millimetres, possibly even more along that coast, even if you're not on the or in the direct track of Gillian. Now that is very widely obviously dependent on where Gillian's track ends up going, but normally if you're to the east of that track in the Gulf of Carpentaria, you're getting some pretty decent rainfall. If you're to the west of that track, you're usually getting bugger all rainfall, because the winds to the west of the track coming in from the southwest, so they're coming in this direction here, coming off the land, so they're pretty dry. So until you get east of that track, you're not seeing too much rainfall. Once you get east of that track, you're seeing a lot of rain. It's a pretty similar concept here on the coast of Queensland, on the east coast of Queensland, because when you're west of a tropical cyclone, you're getting these southwesterlies coming off the land, so you're not getting much rainfall in them at all. When you're south of the cyclone, you're getting these southeast and northeasterly convergence regions, and that's why you're getting the rainfall a lot more in the southern quadrants than you are in the northern quadrants. That does change sometimes when these things are attached to a very strong monsoon, but ordinarily that would be expected. We would be expected to see the heaviest rain and the strongest winds to the south, unless it's attached to a very strong monsoon trough. So hopefully one of the things that we look for is the global computer model ensembles, and sometimes they show us a little bit of love when even the most of the guidance itself doesn't. And we see just the possibility, although it's remote, there is the possibility of the Coral Sea low pushing just a little bit further to the southwest and maybe even to the west and pushing back towards the coast. But look, overall, there's very little love there for us. Mostly it's going to push south and then out to the northeast, and that's pretty clear guidance there now, and it's starting to come together. I've shown you every single global computer model, so unless they're all wrong, which doesn't happen very often, we would be inclined to go with this particular scenario where the system remains fairly slow moving just off the or well off the central Queensland coast, and then eventually pushes out to the east northeast afterwards. So not much love there, even in the ensembles for us. If we look at the ensemble for the Gulf of Carpentaria, Gillian, we can see that overall the same thing as the Bureau of Meteorology is predicting, so a south and then a southwesterly track and eventually making landfall around the border region. Although this particular ensemble from the GFS has the system nailing Mornington Island, but at this point in time, remember, there was a fairly wide error margin there, and there's still just the off chance, according to this guidance, that the system could push eastwards towards the East Queensland coast. But once again, that's about as remote a possibility as we have of the Coral Sea low showing us some love as well. So they're both remote possibilities overall, out to the southwest with this one, and overall out to the northeast with that one. Quite an unusual movement pattern, considering they're only a few or about 1,000 kilometres apart. And just to show you how well the UK Met model has done with this particular cyclone or this particular Coral Sea system, we see this is yesterday's guidance from the UK ensemble. We can really see that overall it really has nailed the situation beautifully. Has the system pushing out just offshore off the central Queensland or Herbert Lower Burdekin coastline. We're just west of that 150 line, and then bang out to the northeast. So far, just completely beautifully has nailed this situation, considering that all the other guidance was all over the shop. The UK Met is the #1 in this particular scenario. Okay, now as we look towards day 2, so this is on the Tuesday, the Euro is still showing us just the possibility of an outlier or two that does cross the coast to the north of Townsville there, but overall, once again, most of the Euro ensemble is on board with an east-northeast to northeasterly movement or motion. We also see the Euro ensemble developing this Vanuatu tropical cyclone as well on day 2 or 3, and once again it'll push to the south towards the New Zealand region. Out to day 3, we see that the Euro ensemble overall wants to push the Gulf of Carpentaria Gillian out towards the southwest Gulf, wants to push the Coral Sea low out here towards the northeast Coral Sea, and overall pushes the tropical cyclone over Vanuatu to the southeast. Day 4, Gillian is now over land. Day 4, the Coral Sea low is now over the far eastern Coral Sea. Day 4, with this system over Vanuatu, is starting to push to the south a little bit more rapidly. Interestingly, by day 5, it's more than likely that Gillian will be located over the Northern Territory, but there is just a chance and a couple of outliers suggesting that it may have gotten back over the JBG, the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf. If that happens, once again, we're looking at a new potential for a cyclone. Over the Coral Sea, that eastern Coral Sea low has now really washed out pretty much in all model guidance, and this system down here is pushing to the south. As we head to day 6, watch out NZ, something's coming towards you. As we also head towards day 6, once again we're looking at the possibility of that ex-Gillian lying somewhere here in the Northern Territory, whether it lies back up here over the Arafura Sea or out here over the Southeast Timor Sea or even over land, not quite sure yet. It's too far away and the model guidance is too varied there. And if we look further afield now to day 8 to 10, and we'll look at this through the GFS and the Euro, we see that day 8 to 10, we have day 8, the possibility of a low lying out here in the Southeast Timor Sea, the Southeast Indian Ocean, and we also have by day 10 a new tropical low developing out here over Fiji, according to a fair amount of model guidance here on the Euro. And by day 10 overall, we have that low that was lying near the dateline near Fiji, pushing west fairly rapidly towards Vanuatu by day 10. And look, all signs at that point in time in the guidance suggest that there's nothing to really push it southeast right then and there. So it may continue pushing west for another couple of days at least after that. So depending on how close it gets, look, we could be talking about a new cyclone threat in close to 2 weeks' time in the Queensland coast. But that will be dependent on obviously how far west it does get. And also over the Kimberley or Pilbara, we could be looking at whatever was left of Gillian being in that region too. So we could be looking at that as we head towards the 1 to 2, particularly closer to the 2-week period. And you can see at day 8 here on the day 8 here on the GFS ensemble, and once again we have areas that could be potentially looked at for development around the Vanuatu region, possibly in the Gulf and possibly off the Kimberley coastline. And then as we head to day 10, we can see some pretty interesting guidance developing with tropical lows possibly spinning up in a number of different areas here in the Coral Sea Vanuatu area. Now that's got nothing to do with the low that's out there right now. That one's going to New Zealand. There's very little doubt about that. But this could be a whole new system that develops somewhere around Fiji or Vanuatu at the day 8 to 10 range. Now obviously we'll keep an eye on that and keep you updated as to how that progresses. But you can see that some of the model guidance is predicting a fairly decent tropical low, or tropical cyclone developing on the GFS. A little bit more bullish than the European, but it often is at this sort of long lead time. So it is something for us to watch, and it is something that is coming through on a lot of the GFS model ensemble over the last couple of days. It is starting to suggest something developing there on the days 10 plus, and also something over the Pilbara or off the Pilbara coastline as well. But you can see there as we head to day 12, 13, we really have no idea where it's going to go because we've got so much model variation here over the central Coral Sea. Alright folks, thanks for watching tonight. That's all we got time for. Just remember that Coral Sea one, while it's not a done deal, our team has dropped out of the planning phase and gone back to on alert. So we'll keep the ute packed, we'll keep the weather stations ready to go, and the video stuff ready to go in case it does decide to push a little closer to the coast. And if one of those outliers comes off, how good would that be? We at least get a bit of rain on the North Queensland coast, and we might get to experience a Cat 1. But at this point in time, not expecting that to happen. We're expecting it to go at northeast, and see you later. That'll be the end of it. Alright, thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll have another update for you tomorrow night. Good night.